Hi, my name is Alex Rozier. I'm the environment reporter for Mississippi Today. And on this episode of MT Speaks, we're going to be talking about the Jackson water crisis and answer some of the questions that you guys sent to us. This issue has been going on for a while, like I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware. This most recent set of news started on August 29th when Governor Tate Reeves announced that the Hobie Curtis plant, the city's main water treatment plant, was failing as a result of issues with pumps at the plant as well as flooding along the Pearl River.
This is a very different situation from a boil water notice, which is also a serious situation which residents of Jackson have become tragically numb to. Until it is fixed, it means we do not have reliable running water at scale.
Let's get into some of the questions that you guys had. This first question is looking at, what are kind of the roles of the federal and city government. It's asking what are the challenges of covering this issue presently and reporting on the both disinvestment and poor management. So we'll get into both of those. As far as disinvestment, the federal government funding from 1977 to 2017. So this is not counting ARPA and infrastructure bill funding, but that dropped 31% to 4% in that time. A lot of that is because in the 70s and 80s, new regulations were passed, like the Clean Water Act and Safe Drinking Water Act. So the federal government sent a lot of money to those cities to comply with those regulations. But in that decrease over that 40-year period of federal funding, Jackson's population also decreased by 20%. So, not only do you have the decrease in federal funding, but the city also has less people, much less people, to participate in funding for the water system. At the city level, the question gets thrown out: how much of it is poor management? How much is not having money? I think it's important to talk about both. As far as poor management, you can look at things like the billing system, staff turnover, and that gets into the not having enough money system. We'll talk a little bit more about the billing issues a little bit later. And something that the city's been criticized recently is for not having a plan. You can read some of our coverage on that to not get too into that right now, but basically, state and federal officials have said, if the city doesn't have a plan for how to spend its money, how are you going to give it all this money? The city in turn has said, well, if we don't have the money, why are we supposed to have a plan? So it's a little bit of a back and forth, but definitely the fingers are being pointed both ways. And then as far as the state is involved, there's definitely the question of why is the state getting involved now? Why haven't they gotten more involved earlier? I think kind of the takeaway there is just that the state itself cannot fund the kind of changes that Jackson needs for its water system. Last year, Mississippi Mayor Lumumba asked for $47 million in short-term repairs. The state was only able to give $3 million. And you're talking about what the city has called a $1 billion need. This next question is, who is in charge of the treatment plant? So yeah, the city, its public works department is the department who runs the treatment plant. At the state level, it's the State Department of Health. They make sure that the city is complying with federal drinking water regulations, and they report those results to the EPA at the federal level. Okay, we got a lot of questions about billing and the water meter issues, which traces back to 2012 when the city entered into a contract with Siemens to run the billing system, which turned out to lead to faulty metering and not being able to read how much water people were using. So the city wasn't able to accurately bill customers. As a result, the Clarion Ledger reported last year the city missed out on $80 million in revenue since 2014. The EPA put out a report in the summer that said that there's a 32% decrease in revenue since 2016, that there are 14,000 stranded bills in March. So those were bills that were not sent to or received by customers. And then kind of the craziest number from that report was that 50% of the water the city was putting out was quote unquote non-revenue. So water that was either getting lost in the system or just not billable because of water billing issues. So the city is in the process of rolling out a new water meter system. It said recently that will be done by next March. So we'll be following that closely to see if that happens. A lot of you guys asked about the Siemens lawsuit settlement. I would point you back to that same Clarion Ledger story from last July. And so that was a $90 million settlement. And 30 million of that went to legal fees, about 50 million towards the city's enterprise fund, the general fund, as well as paying city debt to help improve its credit rating. And then 11 million of that was left for repairs for the meter and billing system. And again, that was from the Clarion Ledger last year on July 29th. Okay, so the next question is about short and long-term solutions. There's been a lot of discussion about that recently. So just to kind of put this in context, the Governor Reeves said last week that it is unlikely that the city will regain control of the water system anytime soon. Lawmakers, as Mississippi Today reported, are mulling a few solutions, whether it's regionalization, privatization, or a state takeover. State takeover is like it sounds. It would just be the state taking over the water system from Jackson. And all of these options would have to go through the state legislature first. We'll be following that to see how that process proceeds. Regionalization is an interesting one because it's something that's been growing in popularity among policy experts. It creates what they call economies of scale by making these systems more efficient, combining resources between neighboring cities and towns. And you know, it would be especially appealing for a place like Jackson, whose population is decreasing, and has, you know, geographically such a big water infrastructure to maintain for a decreasing population. But the option, as my colleague Jeff Pender has reported on this, it's gotten some opposition from other towns who, you know, look at the financial struggles of Jackson, and they're saying, "Oh, why would we want to take part in that?" The EPA actually can incentivize those cities and towns through funding to try to make that kind of thing happen, to try to lessen that financial burden that they would be shouldering. But then there's also, you know, a history of consolidation with Jackson, those towns. There was the sewer system that West Rankin County recently separated off of and went to create their own sewer system. That's leading to a decrease in revenue for Jackson. So there is a history of that might make that kind of more challenging. And Mayor Lumumba himself has questioned whether regionalization would, in fact, actually save the city money. Although that it is something that, again, policy experts that I've talked to say could definitely be helpful for Jackson. And then there's privatization. That is something, again, that Mayor Lumumba has spoken out really strongly against, calling it, you know, a way for a business, for a company to come in and run the water system like a business, and that they would increase costs. And he's kind of described it as, you know, a predatory, or leeching is another word he's used, that would take place. But just to put that in some context, if a private company did take over the water system, and studies do show that that does lead to increased bills for customers, but that would have to go through the Public Service Commission, the state's PSC. So it's not like they could just increase costs without going through a regulatory process. And studies also show that privatized water systems perform better as far as meeting regulations, whether it's the Clean Water Act or the Safe Drinking Water Act. So there is that history too with it. This last question is just about where's federal money going for infrastructure upgrades. So the city is already starting to put some of that money from the American Rescue Plan Act into action. It's using about $8 million on a new distribution line in South Jackson, which is a part of the city that historically, kind of whenever there's issues with water pressure in the city, it affects South Jackson and West Jackson more than the rest of Jackson. And the city is also using some of this federal money to weatherize O.B. Curtis. That was part of what caused the issue after the winter storms last year, where some of the equipment was outside and exposed to the elements and froze. So the city's building a cover for part of O.B. Curtis to try to prevent that from happening again. In total, the city is spending about $34 million of its ARPA money on water and sewer repairs, and it will be seeking a dollar for dollar match from the state. So could reach near $70 million if that total is matched. And then infrastructure bill money will be kind of allocated out through different programs through the Department of Environmental Quality, the State Health Department. That money is yet to be rolled out, but the state in total got about $450 million to spend on water improvements. Thank you guys for sending in your questions. I appreciate the interest you guys reading. Feel free to keep in touch with insight, questions, tips, feedback, all that good stuff. And thanks for watching.